Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I am here with another book review. I meant to do this earlier this week, but I had two kiddos with birthdays and just like a crazy week. So I am only posting one video this week, but it's a good one. It's a book review. It's this book I mentioned briefly in my last book review. It's The Art of Divine Contentment by Thomas Watson. It is published by Soli Deo Gloria Publications, which is a division of Reformation Heritage Books. I highly recommend, if you decide to read this after my review, or if you're just looking for a good book to read, highly recommend this one. I recommend getting this version because Thomas Watson was a Puritan, I believe. He lived during the Puritan times, like 1620 to 1686. So if you get an older version, it might not be so easy to read because it's in Old English. But I recommend this one because it's easy to read and I totally understood it. The only thing is sometimes they use Bible verses and well, there's a lot of Bible verses in here, and it'll have a lot of like thy and stuff like that. So older translations of the Bible passages are used, but the main writing is easy modern day English, easy to understand. My husband was reading another Thomas Watson book. I can't remember what it was, but he was doing it with a Bible study like a while back. And it was not in modern English, so he's like, it's hard to read Thomas Watson. But I highly recommend find a copy where it's modernized, changed a little so that it's easy to understand. So anyway, I was gonna read just the jacket so you can learn a little bit about Thomas Watson because I think that's important. So he was born in Yorkshire. He studied at Emmanuel College in Cambridge, earning a bachelor degree in 1639, Bachelor of Arts specifically. And then he got a Master of Arts degree in 1942. And during his time at Cambridge, he was a dedicated scholar. After completing his studies, Watson lived for a time with Puritan family of Lady Mary Vere. Like I said, Puritan. The widow of Sir Horace Vere, Baron of Tilbury. In 1646, Watson went to St. Stephen's, Walbrook, London, where he served as a lecturer for about 10 years and was a rector for another 6 years, filling the place of Ralph Robinson. In about 1647, he married Abigail Beadle, daughter of John Beadle, an Essex minister of Puritan convictions. They had at least 7 children. In the next 13 years, 4 of them sadly died young. During the Civil War, Watson began expressing his strong Presbyterian views. He had sympathy for the king, however. He was one of the Presbyterian ministers who went to Oliver Cromwell to protest the execution of Charles I. Along with Christopher Love, William Jenkin, and others, he was imprisoned in 1651 for his part in a plot to restore the monarchy. Although Love was beheaded, Watson and the others were released for after petitioning for mercy. Watson was formally reinstated to his pastorate in Walbrook in 1652. When the Act of Uniformity passed in 1662, Watson was ejected from his pastorate. He continued to preach in private in barns, homes, and woods whenever he had the opportunity. In 1666, after the Great Fire of London, Watson prepared a large room for public worship, welcoming anyone who wished to attend. After the Declaration of Indulgence took effect in 1672, Watson obtained a license for Crosbury Hall, Bishopsgate, which belonged to Sir John Langham, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, or maybe it's Langham if you want to pronounce the H, a patron of nonconformists. Watson preached there for 3 years before Stephen Charnock joined him. I've heard of Stephen Charnock as well. And they ministered together until Charnock's death in 1680. Watson kept working until his health failed. He then retired to Barnston in Essex, where he died suddenly in 1686 while engaged in private prayer. What a way to go. Like dying while praying? That's kind of awesome. Anyways, he is buried in the same grave as his father-in-law, who served as minister of Barnston. Watson's depth of doctrine, clarity of expression, warmth of spirituality, love of application, and gift of illustration enhanced his reputation as a preacher and writer. His books are still widely read today. That was it was taken from Meet the Puritans by Joel Beakey and Randall Pedersen. So, like I said, this was an excellent read. It definitely convicted me on how often I am not content. I may say, hey, I feel pretty content, but I'm definitely not as content as I ought to be. I mean, this guy lost 4 children at young ages because like that just was common back then. And yet he was still able to write a book about being content. And he was like talking about like the things people in the Bible went through, like Job's mentioned, and how they were still able to be content and rest in God during those difficult times. Even when people were like, hey, forget about God, he's obviously forgotten you. Still trusting in God, you know? And that's like the whole aspect of being content, is just really having a faith grounded in God, knowing God has these things is doing these things, even difficult things, for your own good and to refine you. A lot of these difficult things we go through in life refine us and grow our faith. So how important that is. But I like using Post-it flags. I mean, this is not sponsored by Post-it flags, but I like using them because if I loan out a book, I don't like to have highlighting stuff all in it. So I just mark what I want to share, maybe with my husband or a friend or whatever, or kid, one of my kids, if they're struggling with something and I think it might help them. But I marked a couple passages that I want to share so you can kind of get an idea of the flow of this book and what it's about. And these are obviously quite a bit jumped out at me. I actually ran out of flags, probably because I do this to every book I read. But yeah, I'm gonna have to buy more. But so from chapter 2, it's not enough for Christians to hear their duty, but they must learn their duty. It is one thing to hear, another thing to learn. But just as it is one thing to eat and another thing to cook. St. Paul was a practitioner. Christians hear much, but it is feared, learn little. There are 4 sorts of ground in the parable of Luke in 8:5-8. And only one good ground, an emblem of this truth that there are many hearers, but few learners. There are 2 things that keep us from learning. One thing, I'll just sum this up because it'll be long if I read them all, but slighting what we hear. So basically just like, whatever. Being indifferent to what we hear, like not really caring. I'm guessing that's kind of what slighting would be. That's not like a term that people use a lot these days. So basically, yeah, things that you don't think are important, just throwing them off to the side. And then also forgetting. I can say I am quick to forget. I will go to church. I go on Saturday nights because our church has Saturday service, and with a bunch of kids, it's just easier. And by the next day or 2, I'm like, what was the sermon on? We're going through the Pentateuch right now, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, for a year, a little over a year. But I, like, a lot of the time, I'm like, that was a really good sermon, and I'll just forget. So yeah, forgetting what we hear is a huge one. I think that's huge for everybody. I think a lot of people will be like, yeah, I heard a great sermon, and then it's like a week later and you're like, I can't remember half of it. So yeah, so those are things that prevent us from learning. Trying to find the other one that jumped out at me. Oh, I actually have 3, so bear with me. This is a really good book. This was one that really, really spoke to me because I've been through difficult situations with friends in the last few years, but it's just, my friends have dealt very unkindly with me and have proven to be false. I know a lot of people have gone through these types of things where you had a good friend get stabbed in the back, and it's hard, you know? It's sad when a friend proves to be like a brook in summer. The traveler, being parched with heat, comes to the brook hoping to refresh himself, but the brook is dried up. Yet be content. You are not alone. Others of the saints have been betrayed by friends, and when they have leaned on them, they have been as a foot out of joint. This is true for David. It is not an enemy reproaching me, but it was thou, a man my equal, my guide and my acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together. Psalm 55, 12 through 14. The antitype Christ was betrayed by a friend. And why should we think it strange to have the same measure dealt out to us as Christ had? The servant is not above his master. A Christian may often read his sin in his punishment, but has he not dealt treacherously with God? How often has he grieved the Comforter, broken his vows, and through unbelief sided with Satan against God? How often has he abused love, taking the jewels of God's mercies and making a golden calf of them, serving his own lusts? How often has he made the free grace of God, which should have been a bolt to keep out sin, rather a key to open the door to it? These wounds the Lord has received in the house of a friend, from Zechariah 13:6. Look upon the kindness of your friend and mourn for your own unkindness against God. Convicting, right? Because how often are we unkind to God? We neglect that relationship far too often. Shall a Christian condemn that in another which he has been too guilty of himself? Has your friend proved treacherous? Perhaps you depended too much on him, relied too heavily on him, and you lay more weight upon a house than pillars will bear. It must break. God said, trust ye not in a friend, from Micah 7:5. Perhaps you put more trust in him than you dared to put in God. Friends are as brittle glasses. We may use them, but if we lean too hard on them, they will break. This is a matter that calls for humility, but not for sullenness and discontent. It's true. I think we do rely too much on people, and we have to realize we're all sinners. We all fall short. So, super important. And this one is the good thing. You have a friend in heaven who will never fail you. There is a friend, said Solomon, that sticketh closer than a brother, from Proverbs 18:24. Such a friend is God. He is very studious and inquisitive on our behalf. He considers with himself, consults and projects how he may do us good. He is the best friend, which fact may grieve contentment in the midst of discourtesies from friends. So consider that he is a loving friend. God is love, hence he has said sometimes to engrave us on the palms of his hand, that we may never be put out of his eye, and to carry us in his bosom near his heart. Amen. Right? Whew, that's tough. Because I think people we can see physically, it's easy to put too much stock in friendships and not enough stock in God and his word and prayer and trust in God. So in this last quote that I'm going to share with you is about discontent. Discontent does not ease our burden, but makes the cross heavier. A contented spirit goes cheerfully under affliction. Discontent makes our grief as unbearable as unreasonable. If the leg is well, it can endure a fetter and not complain. But if the leg is sore, then the fetters are troubling. Discontent of mind is the sore that makes the fetters of affliction more grievous. Discontent troubles us more than the trouble itself. It steeps the affliction in wormwood. When Christ was upon the cross, the Jews brought him gall and vinegar to drink, that it might add to his sorrow. Discontent brings to a man in affliction, gall and vinegar to drink. This is worse than the affliction itself. Is it not folly for a man to embitter his own cross? So as you can see, lots of really good stuff in here and lots of convicting stuff in here. I will say I'll give this book a 10 out of 10. If you want to feel convicted, if you want to think, yeah, maybe I am not content and I should be, I highly recommend The Art of Divine Contentment by Thomas Watson. Find yourself a copy, read it, be blessed by it, be convicted by it, and yeah, that is gonna do it for me. I will see you all next time. I'm not sure what I'm gonna be reading. I'm pretty sure I'm going to try to read the Bible in 6 months. We'll see, before the end of the year. So we'll see if I can do that, but I won't have any book reviews until I'm done with that. And yeah, I don't know what's next for me. We'll see. I'm trying to release 2 videos a week, if not 3. During the summer, it's a little easier, a little more laid back around my house, but yeah. Thank you. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe or follow if you're on Rumble. Yeah, and leave a comment. Tell me what you're reading, and I will see you all next time. Bye!